This program is supported by Protect Plus Gold, a broad-spectrum disinfectant, kills 99.9% of disease-causing germs and works in 10 minutes.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. You're watching Eagle News International. Good evening, CJ.
Good evening, Alma, and good evening to everyone joining the broadcast. Here are tonight's headlines.
The United States and Britain ordered the deployment Friday of thousands of troops to Afghanistan to evacuate their nationals as the Taliban overran more key regional cities in an offensive that has left the capital dangerously exposed.
The head of the Food and Drug Administration assured that there is no shortage of medical-grade oxygen tanks in the country, saying the use and hoarding of unprescribed oxygen tanks may lead to injuries or death.
Dr. Anthony Fauci says Americans can expect to see more children infected with the coronavirus as the highly transmissible Delta variant spreads.
And a Serbian cave hermit gets COVID-19 jab and urges others to follow.
First, the United States and Britain ordered the deployment Friday of thousands of troops to Afghanistan to evacuate their nationals as the Taliban overran more key regional cities in an offensive that has left the capital dangerously exposed. Take a look.
Movement will consist of 3 infantry battalions that are currently in the Central Command area of responsibility. They will move to Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul within the next 24 to 48 hours. 2 of those battalions are United States Marines, and 1 is a U.S. Army battalion.
The orders came as the Taliban took control of Kandahar, the nation's second biggest city in the insurgency's heartland, leaving only Kabul and pockets of other territory in government hands. They were also closer to taking Logar province at the gates of Kabul, with a Taliban spokesman saying insurgents had captured the police headquarters and city jail in the capital Pul El Alam. Earlier on Friday, officials and residents in Kandahar told AFP that government forces had withdrawn en masse to a military facility outside the southern city. Kandahar is completely conquered. The Mujahideen reached Martyrs Square, a Taliban spokesman tweeted, referring to the city landmark. Hours later, the Taliban said they had also taken control of Lashkar Gah, the capital of neighboring Helmand province. President Biden has insisted he has no regrets with his decision, but the speed and ease of the Taliban's urban victories in recent days has been a surprise and forced new calculations.
Afghan leaders have to come together. We lost death and injury, thousands of American personnel. They've got to fight for themselves, fight for their nation. Khan, who's a serious fighter, I think they're beginning to realize they've got to come together politically at the top. But we're going to continue to keep our commitment. But I do not regret my decision.
In Herat today, the Taliban said they had captured the city's longtime strongman, Ismail Khan, who helped lead the defense of the provincial capital, along with his militia fighters. The warlord spokesman later confirmed that Khan had been allowed to return to his residence following negotiations with the Taliban. Pro-Taliban social media accounts have boasted of the vast spoils of war captured by the insurgents, posting photos of armored vehicles, heavy weapons, and even a drone seized by their fighters at abandoned military bases. In a joint statement, the international community, including the U.S., Pakistan, the European Union, and China, said they would not recognize any government in Afghanistan imposed through the use of military force.
In other news, China rejected the World Health Organization's calls for a renewed probe into the origins of COVID-19, saying it supported scientific over political efforts to find out how the virus started. On Thursday, the WHO urged China to share raw data from the earliest COVID-19 cases to revive its probe into the origins of the disease. Vice Foreign Minister Ma Zhaxu told reporters that China opposes political tracing and abandoning the joint report issued after the WHO expert team's Wuhan visit in January. He said, "We support scientific tracing." That report said the virus jumping from bats to humans via an intermediate animal was the most probable scenario, while a leak from Wuhan's virology labs was extremely unlikely. Ma rejected suggestions of new line of investigation. In the face of China's reluctance to open up to outside investigators, experts are increasingly open to considering the theory that the virus might have leaked out of a lab once dismissed as a conspiracy propagated by the U.S. far right. Even WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus has said that the initial probe into Wuhan's virology labs had not gone far enough, while President Joe Biden in May ordered a separate investigation into the virus origins from the U.S. intelligence community.
Meanwhile, Malacanang urged the public not to believe in fake experts who claim that COVID-19 vaccines are not safe and effective against COVID-19. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque denied a new claims made by Dr. Romeo Quijano, a retired professor at the University of the Philippines College of Medicine, that COVID-19 jabs are unsafe and more dangerous than the virus causing the respiratory disease. Take a look.
Kung totoo ba, meron daw po kasi nagsasabi na toxicologist na mas delikado daw ang vaccine kaysa sa virus.
Hindi
ano
po
daw
totoo
po
yan.
ang reaksyon ng palad?
Hindi po totoo yan. Sa buong mundo po, kinikilala natin na lahat po ng bakuna na ginagamit natin, aprobado ng WHO at ng Philippine FDA at iba't iba pang FDA ng iba't ibang bansa, ay ligtas at epektibo. Huwag po kayong makinig sa mga nagsasabing hindi epektibo at hindi ligtas ang mga bakuna. Yan po ay mga peking eksperto. Nagkaisa po ang lahat ng mga dalubhasa na ang solusyon sa pandemya ay ang bakuna.
Opo. Ano sabi ko? Wala naman po. Hindi ko pa.
Staying in the country where the COVID-19 vaccination pace is picking up, with the numbers of jabs administered nationwide reaching 26,677,269 doses, according to the NTF, or the National Task Force Against COVID-19 today. Based on NTF data, as of August 12, a total of 12,182,006 or 17.19% of eligible Filipinos targeted for the COVID-19 vaccination program are now fully inoculated, and the more than 14 million others with the first dose. Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr., the NTF chief implementer, said the government is on a more aggressive vaccination drive amid the threat of the Delta variant. The Philippines hit a record high of 710,482 doses administered on August 5th, surpassing the targeted daily vaccination rate of 500,000 doses. Meanwhile, another 4,322 persons have recovered from the COVID virus today, bringing the total number of recoveries in the country to 1,587,069. The Department of Health said this is equivalent to a 92.6% recovery rate. Meanwhile, there is now a total tally of 29,539 recorded deaths.
The head of the Food and Drug Administration here in the country assured that there is no shortage of medical-grade oxygen tanks in the country, saying the use and hoarding of unprescribed oxygen tanks may lead to injuries or even death. In a virtual briefing, FDA Director General Eric Domingo said there has been no shortage of oxygen tanks in any part of the country, with the Department of Trade and Industry reporting that less than 50% of the manufacturing capability of oxygen plants are in use. Take a look.
Para lang malaman na lahat, ang medical grade oxygen is classified as a drug para po siyang gamot, no? Kasi kailangan po ito pure, kailangan po ito talagang 99% ang laman niya at wala siyang mga halo na maaaring pong magdulot ng sakit sa tao, no? Ang number one po talaga natin ng medical gas na nila-license ng FDA ay yung oxygen at yung pong pressurized na tangke kung saan siya nakalagay. Parang yun po yung binibilang natin na kanyang packaging niya na ina-approve din po at nire-regulate din po ng FDA. Saan naman natin at minadali rin po ng FDA ang pag-process ng mga applications ng mga manufacturers for medical oxygen. And we have 81 licensed manufacturers all over the country. Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao po yan nakakalat ang kanilang mga manufacturing plants. Pagkatapos po, meron din tayong 30 additional na ospital na nag-generate ng sarili nilang oxygen na license din po ng FDA sa Luzon, Visayas at Mindanao. At so far, wala pa naman po tayong nararamdaman na shortage. Dahil sa pagtataya po ng Department of Trade, wala pa naman po 50% ng mga manufacturing capability ng ating oxygen plants ang nagagamit ngayon at kinakailangan ng ating mga ospital. So, kaya pa naman po natin yan. Gusto lang namin paalala, naglabas po kami ng advisory sa lahat. Huwag naman po yung mag-hoarding or magtatago ng mga tangke-tangke ng oxygen sa bahay. Unang-una, ay hindi naman po tama yun dahil baka mayroong mga ilangan iba. Pangalawa, hindi po yun po pwede. No? Kasi unang-una, the sale of medical grade oxygen requires the prescription of a licensed physician. So pinakikiusapan po natin ng mga doktor, magre-reseta lamang ng oxygen kung talagang kinakailangan ng pasyente, no? Lalo na yung mga for home care. Otherwise, kung para for standby purposes lang, hindi naman po yan tama. Use of oxygen therapy without guidance from your health professional may lead to irreversible health damages. Meron pong toxicity ang oxygen, no? At pwedeng ma-injure actually ang ating baga pag gumagamit tayo ng high concentration oxygen or ng pure oxygen nang hindi tama ang pagkakagamit nito. At ang isa pa rin pong napaka-importante, ang oxygen po ay talagang highly combustible and flammable. Pwede po talagang sumabog yan. Lalo na kapag nakatago sa isang high-pressure tank. Dahil po niya ng LPG, no? Mas malakas po ito. And they may cause explosion and environmental hazard.
Meanwhile, the quest to unravel the mysteries behind long COVID took a step forward on Thursday with the launch of an internationally coordinated attempt to capture standardized data on the condition. Now, the World Health Organization and the International Severe Acute Respiratory and Emerging Infection Consortium announced a project to amass a so-called 4-outcome set to help build up a better picture of post-COVID conditions. In a statement via the WHO, ICARIC said long COVID, which remains one of the lesser understood aspects of the pandemic, was an emerging global healthcare crisis. Little is known about why some people, after coming through the acute phase of the infection, struggle to recover and suffer ongoing symptoms, including shortness of breath, extreme fatigue, and brain fog, as well as cardiac and neurological disorders. The project, entitled Post-COVID Condition 4 Outcomes, will start by surveying people living with long COVID. The first phase, to be completed in the coming months, will focus on what outcomes should be measured. The second, to be completed in 2022, will look at how to measure these outcomes.
Meanwhile, Russia today recorded its highest daily coronavirus death toll for a second day running, as a third wave of infections persists despite efforts from authorities to boost vaccinations. A government tally showed 815 fatalities over the past 24 hours and 22,277 new cases. Authorities have faced a vaccine skeptic population with a poll by the Independent Levada Center this week showing that 55% of Russians don't plan on getting inoculated. Take a look.
Доработана вакцина, некачественно проверенная вакцина так, на сегодняшний день. Но я сомневаюсь, потому что очень много на сегодняшний день людей вакцинировались, и не только у нас в стране, и во многих странах.
Russia, the fourth worst hit country in the world in terms of cases, has since mid-June been hit by a new wave of infections driven by the highly transmissible Delta variant. The new figures bring Russia's total fatalities from COVID-19 to 168,864, the highest toll in Europe. Moscow, the epicenter of Russia's outbreak, and a host of regions have introduced mandatory vaccination measures to speed up the country's inoculation drive, and President Vladimir Putin has repeatedly called on Russians to get vaccinated. While Russia has 3 homegrown vaccines available to the population, it doesn't distribute any of the Western-made jabs. But as of today, just over 30 million of Russia's some 146 million people had been fully vaccinated, according to the GoGov website, which tallies COVID data from the regions.
Staying in Russia, where 2 women died following an explosion on a bus in the western part of the country that also left 17 people injured, according to local authorities today. The explosion went off overnight Thursday when the bus carrying 35 passengers was at a stop near a shopping center. The governor of Voronezh region, Alexander Gusev, said Friday on his Telegram channel that the number of injured has risen to 19. 1 woman died shortly after the explosion and another passed away in hospital early today, according to Governor Gusev. Several of the wounded remain in serious condition, according to the governor. Now, video taken by passers-by and posted on social media showed that the blast tore the roof of the vehicle and blew out its windows. The Voronezh branch of the investigative committee, which probes major crimes, said today that it had opened a negligence case over the upkeep of the bus. It added that experts from Moscow have been sent to Voronezh to help establish the circumstances of the explosion. Now, Voronezh Deputy Governor Sergei Sokolov had earlier told the Interfax news agency that there was nothing to indicate that this was a terrorist attack.
All right, we apologize for that. We will run the correct video a little later on. Meanwhile, 2 protesters were injured when Thai police fired tear gas and rubber bullets at a Bangkok rally today, the 3rd time this week, as coronavirus cases soar and anger builds over the government's handling of the pandemic. The kingdom is grappling with its worst virus outbreak so far and registered a new daily high of 23,418 infections today. The sluggish rollout of Thailand's vaccination program and financial pain from restrictions is heaping political pressure on Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha's government. Now, protesters gathered in Bangkok at a major intersection by Victory Monument, defying a ban on public gatherings, and set fire to sacks of rotting fruit to symbolize the economic hardship of farmers. Demonstrators attempted to march on Prime Minister Prayut's residence inside the military barracks, holding a large banner that read, "Prayut must get out immediately." Police used barbed wire and rows of shipping containers to block their path, while officers fired tear gas, rubber bullets, and water cannon.
Now, in other news, a Malaysian serviceman shot dead 3 fellow Air Force personnel at a military base before killing himself today, according to police, a rare case of gun violence in the Southeast Asian nation. Now, the serviceman, who was supposed to be undergoing a coronavirus quarantine, snatched the firearms from a guard post, according to local media reports. When a colleague tried to calm him down, he reportedly asked, "Do you want to live or die?" before shooting him in the stomach and opening fire on the other victims. Police said the serviceman went on the rampage at around 7:30 a.m. at the Air Force Base in Sarawak State on the Malaysian part of Borneo Island. He killed 2 men on the spot, while the third managed to drive to a health clinic before dying of his injuries. After shooting his colleagues, the serviceman turned the gun on himself, and authorities are investigating his motives, which still remain unclear up to now.
And now we go back to Russia, where earlier 2 women have died following an explosion on a bus in western Russia that also left 17 people injured, according to local authorities today. Take a look. Now, the explosion went off overnight Thursday when the bus carrying 35 passengers was at a stop near a shopping center. The governor of Voronezh region, Alexander Gusev, said on his Telegram channel that the number of injured has risen to 19. 1 woman died shortly after the explosion and another passed away in hospital on Friday morning, according to Gusev. Several of the wounded remain in serious condition, according to the governor. Video taken by passerby and posted on social media showed that the blast tore the roof off the vehicle and blew out its windows. The Voronezh branch of the investigative committee, which probes major crimes, said Friday that it had opened a negligence case over the upkeep of the bus. It added that experts from Moscow had been sent to Voronezh to help establish the circumstances of the explosion. Voronezh Deputy Governor Sergei Sokolov had earlier told the Interfax news agency that there was nothing to indicate that this was a terrorist attack. And the news continues here on Eagle News. CJ and I will be back right after this break.
This portion is brought to you by North Luzon Express Terminal.
Mamang sorbetero, tayo sumayaw, kalembang mong hawak, muling ikaw ay batang munti sa'yo'y naghihintay, biglang ligaya ngayong tagkaraw. Mamang sorbetero, tayo sumayaw, kalembang mong hawak, muling ikaw ay mainit na labi, nagbabagang mata, sunog na pag-ibig, parang awa mo na. Mamang sorbetero, anong ngalan mo? Tinda mong ice cream, gustong gusto ko. Init ng buhay, pinapawi mo, sama ng loob, nalilimutan ko. La 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 la
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back to the news. San Francisco is poised to become the first U.S. city to demand proof of full vaccination against COVID-19 to access indoor dining and entertainment venues. Take a look.
We're taking our steps around vaccinations just a little bit further. And starting August 20th, you will need proof of vaccination in businesses for your customers in high contact areas like bars, restaurants, clubs, theaters, entertainment venues, indoor gyms and fitness, and large indoor events with more than 1,000 people. By October 13th, employees at these establishments must be vaccinated as well. So all of the employees need to show proof of vaccination by October 13th to their employer. Now, to be clear, this will not include people or kids who are under the age of 12 because they can't get vaccinated. And as I said, why are we doing this? It's to protect the workers.
As was said, the rule will not affect children under 12 as they are not eligible for immunization in the United States. Currently, 77% of San Francisco's nearly 900,000 residents have received at least one dose of the vaccine, and 71% are fully vaccinated. White House Pandemic Response Coordinator Jeff Zients on Thursday spoke in favor of vaccination requirements, saying they are gaining momentum across the country.
Staying in the U.S., Dr. Anthony Fauci said Americans can expect to see more children infected with COVID-19 as the highly transmissible Delta variant spreads. Dr. Rochelle Walensky, meanwhile, director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, said the best way to protect young children not yet eligible for vaccines is for their parents to get their shots. Take a look.
We are dealing with a global outbreak of the Delta variant. It now shows that at least 117 countries now have the Delta variant. We know the transmissibility that's greater than Alpha variant, at least 2 times as great. This makes a major difference in transmissibility. The viral load is up to 1,000 times greater in the nasopharynx of people with Delta than Alpha, which is a mechanistic reason why you have such a tremendous increase in transmissibility. Next slide. There's no doubt that there are more children getting infected. As I mentioned in one of my slides, the Delta variant is much more highly transmissible than was Alpha. So given that, you will see more children likely get infected. And since you have a certain percentage of children, even though the percentage is small, certain percentage of children will require hospitalization. So quantitatively, you will see more children in the hospital. Regarding the severity of illness, there was a couple of studies, mostly international, which suggested that Delta was more severe in adults, namely causing more relative percentage of hospitalization and more severe disease. With regard to children, this could possibly be the case, but we are not seeing this in a definitive way. The only thing we know for sure is that more infections mean more children will be in the hospital.
What we know is that where we have higher rates of infection among children is where we have lower rates of vaccination in general, higher rates of community transmission. We do know how to keep our children safe. We know how to do so in schools, and we know that most of the infections that is coming into schools is coming from high rates of disease in the community. So best way to keep our schools safe, and we know how to do it, is to vaccinate everyone who can be vaccinated, vaccinate family members if children cannot yet be vaccinated, and then to follow the mitigation strategies in our school guidance, including masking in school.
Meanwhile, mourning Indonesian parents regularly visit the grave of their 1-month-old baby who died from COVID-19. Nearly 400,000 children under 17 have been infected by the virus in Indonesia, killing over 1,200 of them, nearly half under 1 year old. Take a look.
Langsung segera mendapatkan penanganan di rumah sakit yang ada NICU-nya. Dan pada saat itu kami mulai cari dari pukul kurang lebih 10 pagi sampai ketemu jam 6 sore. Keliling di Jakarta semuanya pada full, pada nggak bisa karena memang keadaan juga memang udah itu nggak bisa lagi lah untuk penanganannya.
PGD membludak itu banyak orang.
Udah kebanyakan. Jadi kita harus melihat apakah anak-anak tetap bisa mendapatkan haknya untuk mengakses fasilitas kesehatan, mendapat layanan kesehatan dan gizi, contohnya vaksinasi rutin, lalu layanan kesehatan lainnya. Nah, apabila ini tidak terpenuhi, nah hal ini akan tentunya membuat anak-anak semakin besar teresiko infeksi. Dan apabila terinfeksi, tentunya ancaman kematian itu akan lebih besar.
As cases soared in Indonesia's sprawling capital, Manitik raced from one bursting hospital to another in a desperate bid to get treatment. But Jakarta's healthcare system was teetering on the brink of collapse, forcing hospitals to treat gasping patients in makeshift tents outside while desperate families race to find oxygen tanks to treat the sick and dying at home. Officially, about 400,000 Indonesians under 17 have been infected during the pandemic, although underreporting and patchy testing make comparative figures difficult to come by. The virus has killed over 1,200 children, nearly half, as we said earlier, under 1 year old, with the majority dying in June and July as cases surged, according to Health Ministry data and experts. Save the Children warned that the tragedy of Indonesia's child deaths was compounded by the thousands of other children orphaned after the virus killed their parents.
Nah,
dengan keadaan Bekasi seperti ini.
And a worsening coronavirus outbreak in Sydney prompted Australian regions to pull up the drawbridge on the city and surrounding state today by implementing unprecedented travel restrictions. Western Australia Premier Mark McGowan said from Tuesday, would-be travelers will have to secure an exemption to enter his state, provide a negative COVID test, show proof of at least one vaccine dose, undergo 14 days home quarantine, and then install a tracking app on their phone. If Sydney's cases go above 500 a day, travelers will have to undergo a mandatory 14-day hotel quarantine, and exemptions will be limited to a small number, including the armed forces. Authorities have indicated that a Sydney lockdown could remain in some form until October, but have refrained from further citywide restrictions. Prime Minister Scott Morrison's Conservative government has largely delegated responsibility for the pandemic response to states. Lockdowns, testing, travel restrictions, and vaccine rollouts are mostly dictated by state governments, who have often publicly bickered about their strategies.
At least 21 people died as heavy downpours struck central China's Hubei province. This was just weeks after record floods wreaked havoc and killed hundreds in a neighboring province. Now in Hubei, torrential rains caused power cuts and landslides, destroying hundreds of homes and forcing the evacuation of nearly 6,000 people. The province's Emergency Management Bureau said as reservoirs reached dangerous levels. China's Ministry of Emergency Management said hundreds of firefighters and thousands of police and military have been dispatched to the worst affected areas. Around 100,000 people were evacuated in the southwestern province of Sichuan last weekend as heavy rains caused several landslides. China's Meteorological Administration warned that heavy rainfall was likely to continue until next week, with regions along the Yangtze River, including Shanghai, vulnerable to flooding. China has been battered by unprecedented rains in months, extreme weather that experts say is increasingly common due to global warming.
The death toll from Turkey's flash flood soared to 27 today as President Recep Tayyip Erdogan prepared to inspect one of the hardest hit regions and lend his moral support. Now, the devastations across Turkey's northern Black Sea regions came just as the disaster-hit country was winning control over hundreds of wildfires that killed 8 people and destroyed swathes of forest along its scenic southern coast. Turkey also suffered another bout of flooding in the northeastern province of Rize last month that killed 6. World scientists believe that natural disasters like those in Turkey are becoming more intense and frequent because of global warming and climate change. Emergency services said waters briefly rose in some parts as high as 4 meters or 13 feet before subsiding and spreading across a region stretching more than 150 miles wide. Now, Agriculture and Forestry Minister Bekir Pakdemirli warned on Wednesday that the area was facing a disaster that we had not seen in 50 or 100 years. Rescuers have been forced to evacuate a hospital holding 45 patients, 4 of them in intensive care in the region around the coastal city of Sinop.
Meanwhile, Greece breathed a sigh of relief after mega fires that have ravaged much of the country were brought under control. But firefighters elsewhere in southern Europe braced for fresh outbreaks. Now, although rain and a drop in temperatures helped firefighters in Greece gain a hold on the active fronts of the island of Evia and the Arcadia region, which have burned more than 100,000 hectares, winds forecast this weekend increase the likelihood of new flare-ups, according to authorities. Rising temperatures and increased dryness due to changing rainfall patterns have created the ideal conditions for forest fires, with a 5-year period to 2019 unprecedented for fire, especially in Europe and North America, according to the World Meteorological Organization. Scientists say with heat waves becoming longer and more intense due to climate change, they lead to out-of-control wildfires that inflict unprecedented material and environmental damage. Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis has called the fires Greece's greatest ecological disaster in decades, which he linked directly to climate change.
And Spain is also on alert for wildfires as a heat wave that has enveloped southeastern Europe in recent days shifts west. Take a look.
Nos enfrentamos durante los próximos días a una de las peores olas de calor de los últimos 20 años. Desde el año 2003 no se daba una situación con estas temperaturas tan altas, humedades tan bajas, que provocan un riesgo de incendio extremo o muy elevado en gran parte del país. Teniendo en cuenta que la situación meteorológica es muy parecida a la que se ha dado en Grecia o en Turquía con los grandes incendios, y aquí existe esa posibilidad por la situación extrema de la vegetación.
Now, temperatures are forecast to reach highs of around 40 degrees Celsius or 104 degrees Fahrenheit in much of the Iberian Peninsula in the coming days as firefighters try to extinguish a fire. In Tarragona, forestry agents try to prevent a new fire from breaking out near Barcelona amid the worst heat wave in nearly 20 years.
To Japan now, where tens of thousands of people were urged to evacuate today as unprecedented levels of torrential rain hit western Japan, raising the risk of floods and landslides, according to the weather agency. The downpours are forecast to continue for several more days over a large swathe of the country, from the northern Tohoku region to Kyushu in the south. In Unzen City in southern Nagasaki Prefecture, 2 houses were hit by a landslide, with 1 woman in her 50s feared dead, according to a local official. The heaviest rain was in Hiroshima Prefecture, where non-compulsory evacuation orders were issued to at least 69,500 people, and the top flood alert announced. The Land Ministry warned that water levels are extremely high in 3 rivers, 2 running through the Hiroshima region and 1 in southern Kumamoto, according to scientists. Climate change is intensifying the risk of heavy rain in Japan and elsewhere because a warmer atmosphere holds more water. On Friday, the JMA said that in the 24 hours from 6 a.m. on Friday, 300 millimeters of rain is expected in the northern part of Kyushu, with 200 to 250 millimeters forecast in many other parts of the country. Eagle News will be back with more stories. Please don't go away.
Protect yourself and loved ones. Use Protect Plus Gold, a broad-spectrum disinfectant that kills 500 strains of bacteria, fungi, and viruses such as coronavirus and other disease-causing microorganisms. Also potent against viruses in pets. It kills 99.9% of disease-causing germs and works in 10 minutes. Dissolve 1 teaspoon in 1 liter of water. Apply on areas for disinfection or use it for misting. Protect Plus Gold.
Welcome back. The jail de facto leader of the giant Samsung walked free today on parole. The latest this instance of South Korea's long tradition of freeing business leaders imprisoned for corruption or tax evasion on economic grounds. Take a look.
국민 여러분들께 너무 큰 걱정을 끼쳐드렸습니다. 정말 죄송합니다.
Now, Lee Jae-yong, the 202nd richest person in the world, according to Forbes, with a net worth of 11.4 billion, was serving a 2.5-year prison sentence imposed in January for bribery, embezzlement, and other 2 offenses in connection with the corruption scandal that brought down ex-South Korean President Park Geun-hye. The Justice Ministry announced he had been paroled, citing concerns over the coronavirus pandemic's impact on the economy. Nonetheless, Lee remains on trial over alleged stock manipulation that effectively eased his path to take control of the family conglomerate, the same purpose for which he was convicted of bribing Park.
형 축하해.
Now, finally, in our news, almost 20 years ago, Panta Petrovic made social distancing a lifestyle choice when he moved into a tiny Serbian mountain cave to avoid society. Take a look. Now, last year, on one of his visits to town, the dreadlocked man with a long beard found out there was a pandemic raging. After vaccines against COVID-19 became available, he got jabbed and urges everyone to do the same. The cave Petrovic calls home is accessible only by a steep climb that is not for the faint-hearted. It is equipped with an old rusty bathtub, which he uses as a toilet, some benches, and a stack of hay that serves as a bed. Petrovic hails from the nearby town of Pirot, where he worked as a laborer on the black market as he did abroad for some time. He remarried on multiple occasions, a life he called hectic. Now, always a nature lover, he gradually found out that isolating from society brings him freedom he never tasted before. Petrovic receives welfare, but also relies on donations for food and supplies for the animals. After the vaccines became available, he rolled up his sleeve and got jabbed. Petrovic said he doesn't understand the fuss some vaccine skeptics make and underlined that he believes in a process that aims to eradicate diseases.
Good night, Petrovich.
Well, you know, he is the last person to need a vaccine, but he still got it. So
that's true.
Lesson for everyone, get
vaccinated.
There you go. That's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. The news continues tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.
This program is supported by Protect Plus Gold, a broad-spectrum disinfectant, kills 99.9% of disease-causing germs and works in 10 minutes.